Hey y'all, I'm Kim, host of Book Marketing Mania, and I'm so thrilled you're tuning in to learn how to build your audience and reach new readers as a podcast host and guest. So have you ever wondered, is my book done once it's launched, or is there still space to talk about it? You're going to love today's conversation with my special guest, Jessica Hurlbut, author of Unlimited Motherhood and co-host of the Full Spectrum Parent podcast. When Jessica reached out to pitch me as a guest, we hadn't connected at all before, but she was so genuine, and as a fellow special needs mom, I was excited to see she had released a book for moms, not only like me, but you too if you're a mom. I couldn't wait to dig into Jessica's book marketing journey and be ready to take notes, y'all, when she says, ads don't necessarily sell books. Influence does. Oh, goodness, y'all. Jessica also talks about how she connected with target readers one by one to invite them personally to join her launch team. Oh, y'all, you're in for a treat today, so let's get to it. Okay, welcome, Jessica. I'm so thrilled you're here to serve my listeners today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kim. I'm excited. This is the first podcast interview I've done about marketing, so I'm excited.
Yes, I'm so glad we were talking before we hit record that I think it's such a great opportunity for authors to really talk about their author journey, their marketing journey, how they got a publishing contract and, just how they started writing. Like there's so many things I think authors could be sharing about that's not necessarily marketing their book specifically, but you get to market your book because that's what it's all about, right? Why you went on this whole journey. Exactly. So yeah, I was so glad, Jessica, that you reached out to me. So let's tell everybody first off, I haven't had a chance to read your book yet, but I can't wait to. But tell us about your book, Unlimited Motherhood, and who you wrote it for.
Sure. Yeah. So I wrote it for moms, as the title tells you, but kind of more specifically a special needs mom. I have two kids on the severe end of autism. But I didn't want to write a book just for them. I didn't want to narrow down that much. So really my book is for any Christian moms really that feel limited by the circumstances they find themselves in. So that could be a mom that's got several little toddlers running around the house and can't do anything, can't go to the bathroom by herself, or a special needs mom, or even a mom of kids that are older, but those kids are struggling in some ways, maybe behavior wise. And you just kind of feel like, I think motherhood is one of the most beautiful gifts that some of us are given, but it's also nobody warns you how hard it's going to be. So it's really just kind of a vulnerable encouragement to moms that it's okay, that it's hard. It's okay to be honest and to see God working in and through our lives despite the hard.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And I know if anybody's been listening to the show for a while, you probably know I don't talk a lot about it publicly, but I do have an adult son with autism. So yes. I want to say to Jessica, I really appreciated that you mentioned that when you reached out to me because we had not connected before. So I knew you had listened to the podcast or you would not have known any other way. So yeah, I'm just so thrilled to find this resource because we have like a huge special needs ministry at our church. And so it's so fun to have your podcast and your book to be able to share with other families. But also, in addition to my child with autism, I have an adult son that doesn't have autism. And, we've always joked about his life. I think he's been, what's the nice way to put it? He's had a lot of special needs of his own, right? He's been a little harder to raise in some ways, although I think in adulthood, I feel like it's switched a little bit, but I so appreciate that it wasn't just a book for autism moms, although there is a place for that for sure. But we also, many of us have other children. And so, we have the same parenting struggles and those are the parenting struggles you meet so many other moms and talk to, but yet I have my, my core group of moms that is all we talk about is our special needs child. So I love that it's a book that will work for all moms, and we all have struggles we go through. My goodness. So we have hardships. And so, we need authors like you, Jessica, just to be pulling us through it. It's like you share that encouragement, but you're also sharing the hard stuff too, which is, I can't even imagine. That's how I got into all this. I think is just, I thought I was going to write a book about my autism mom journey, and I just kind of, it hasn't developed the way, I thought it would. And I felt God calling me in a different direction. So I'm just always in awe of people that can write about it because it is a hard, hard journey. Motherhood is hard, period, obviously.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about Jessica because this is your first book. So I want to
Mm-hmm.
talk to you. A lot of our listeners, are just now mulling around the ideas of their books, or, maybe they're pitching them to publishers. Maybe they're deciding, do they want to self publish? But what's worked well for you and what hasn't worked well for you as a
Sure.
first time author marketing your book?
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say, I mean, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I don't know what to expect, well, join the club.
Mm-hmm.
I started actually looking online for other first-time authors that were publishing through the publishing house that I was going through, just
Uh
so I
huh.
could pick their brain too.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really don't know what to expect. I was traditionally published, so thankfully I was blessed with like a marketing team, which is amazing. But you start to realize like, they help in certain ways, but then in other ways you're really left on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, some things that really I've been surprised that don't seem to be working. And again, it's only been 3 months since my book was released,
Yeah.
but my publishing team has paid for Amazon ads. And I thought, yes, amazing, awesome. And I'm like, oh, I'm not sure they're really doing much.
Yeah.
So I would say again, I'm nothing wrong with
Uh
ads.
huh.
Not saying
Yeah.
we shouldn't pay for advertising. I'm grateful I don't have to pay for it out of my pocket right now. But
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm honestly surprised at how it's probably putting the book in front of more women and more moms for sure. But I just realizing more and more that's really not how you sell books, especially nonfiction books. So that's one thing. I mean, I had heard before, but it's different. It's like in theory versus in practice,
Uh
right?
huh.
So, like a person who's looking for a nonfiction, especially a nonfiction Christian book, is looking for someone they can trust.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because you put the book out there more, like, yes, that kind of is like brand awareness, or people will like, oh, I remember seeing that book somewhere else. But to me, it's not enough to get somebody just to recognize it. They won't buy it, right? There's something
Mm-hmm.
about not knowing personally, but trusting and knowing, an author to a degree. So whether that's social media, email list, speaking engagements, I just really have realized that ads don't necessarily sell books, influence does.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to use my own influence in the sphere that I have, but also realizing that kind of you can saturate that market too, right? Like,
Uh huh.
me and my husband are pastors and we live in a small town. And so I've done a lot of things to let people know about my book, and tons of people have bought it, which has been amazing. But it's like
Mm-hmm.
you get past this point where you're like, and that's all I got.
Yeah.
Right? And like, so that's where like I would encourage, first time authors to really think about influence in a greater way. So like there's the metron that I function in, so I can influence my community and my church, and maybe the people who follow me online, whatever your social media following is, but like how do I get past that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes we think the answer is, well, I'll do Facebook ads and I'll do Amazon ads. And again, they're not wrong, but what I'm seeing is I have to think more creatively, kind of out of the box. How do I get past that kind of metron? And to me, it's always influence. So whether that's me connecting with another podcaster, like I just went to Nashville, Tennessee last week with Crystal Payne, the Money Saved
Yeah.
Mom.
Yeah.
So I did an interview with her at her house because she
Uh
only
huh.
does them in person. And I'm thinking, well, they're not paying me to do this. And I just bought a plane ticket and I had to fly out here. Now I got an Airbnb, and I'm thinking, is this worth it? But you realize, like her in particular, she has a lot of influence.
Uh huh. Yes.
Influence I don't have, but in the audience, that exactly where I need to be, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Christian mom, the mom that, she fosters and has adopted a child. So the
Yes.
foster care adoption piece, which I write about in my book, also special needs. She has a special needs child. So it's like, I'm kind of borrowing her influence,
Uh huh.
right? And so that's one way, like whether it's podcast or, having people who are influential in your sphere, read your book or review your book and post a
Mm-hmm.
review online. All of those things are a way to increase your influence. Also, even just, and I'm not saying you have to like super focus on social media, but
Uh
sometimes
huh.
I think if you wrote a really good blog post or Instagram post or reel that really reached like an
Uh
audience,
huh.
that can boost more influence and create more sales for your book than spending a whole bunch of money on ads. I've seen it
Yeah.
over and over again. Like you can spend the money on ads and see a little bit of return, but if you do something that causes someone to be influenced by you, whether that's being on someone else's podcast or them watching a reel that really speaks to them or them reading a blog post that everybody's sharing because it's like, oh my goodness, that person
Mm-hmm.
gets me. You just expanded that sphere of influence. And that is how you're really going to sell more books than ads. Again, I'm not saying they're
Mm-hmm.
wrong, but I think we put too much like we bank too much on them thinking if
Mm-hmm.
I just get this out here, if more people know about this book, they're going to buy it. No,
Right.
more people actually need to know about you. They need to
Yes.
like you and connect with you. Then they'll want to read what you have to say. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's definitely been a learning. I'm still learning, but
Yeah.
I'm learning for sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that because, yeah, I think we all do think about, we just hear so much about ads, and you think, oh,
Right.
that's all I got to do is advertise my book. And you do see it on Amazon, when you're looking for a particular author or a book, they always pop up, sponsored books.
Hmm.
But yeah, you're right. If you don't know who that is, it's not going to entice you to click on it. I mean, it might, but I think you'd still be like, I still don't know who this is. So, I don't have time for this. You'd be clicking off to go to something
Yeah,
else, right back to your original
exactly.
search. So yeah, I think about that. And I think, oftentimes too, people think, ads are so expensive. Well, they are, for a good reason, right? But I think we sometimes forget that we're also spending money, in our time, right? We're either spending it with our
Right.
money or our time. And I love what you're talking about there because oftentimes, something just hits with the people you're trying to reach, whether it is a reel or it's a blog
Hmm.
post or something, or like you say, a podcast interview, something hits with your target reader and we
Hmm.
get excited, and then we want to do more of it. But I think sometimes we just start pushing stuff out there without thinking about why did they react to
Right.
this, specifically, and what can I
Right.
do more of that
Yeah.
and just double down on it.
Yeah, one of the things that I've done is I've gone back to like over the last few years and looked at a post or a reel that did really, really well.
Uh huh.
And I've just literally reshared it. But at the end, I would put a link with my book in it.
Yeah.
Why not? Like sometimes I think we try to recreate the wheel and be like, well, I got to do something like that. Like, what was it about that?
Yes.
Sometimes you're just like, okay, I wrote this already.
Uh
Why don't I
huh.
just reshare it and see what kind of traction it gets? And this time it's leading somebody somewhere, right? Before it's
Yes.
just the post, but then,
Uh huh.
oh, well, look at they have a book. So
Uh
then they
huh.
can click on that link or I'm going to go to their bio, right? So sometimes it's kind of using what you already have too and just saying, okay, this really seemed to impact people. How can I direct them to my book from here? So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a great idea. And I think too, like think about, I know for probably you, Jessica, have probably been around the online space for quite a while. And I think others, that have been too, like you have built up so much content out there that you may have guest posted for somebody, back when guest blogging was so popular.
Hmm.
Or you may have your own post, yeah, that you've got out there. And maybe, like you say, you want to get some new traction to it. It's good content. You wrote it. And but you forget that, oh, well, did I even have any links in that at that time? Like can I
Right.
go update that content? Or,
Exactly.
also challenge everybody if you've had some past interviews like this, guest interviews to just, not be afraid to like go ask the host to update their blog post. Is there, I have an additional resource for your readers or your listeners. I'd love to add that to the content you already have, especially if
Yes.
that host is really good about, sharing content over and over. Oh gosh, there's so many things I was thinking about, just like you talking about, getting outside of your sphere that you have, eventually you kind of like run out and you've got to go figure out where are those other target readers at or target listeners like today, where are my other target listeners and readers tuning into? So I want to ask you about that because I know as a first time author, a lot of times authors wait until, and even if they've wrote several books, I shouldn't just say first time authors, but everybody seems to kind of wait until the book's in hand to really think about the marketing of it because it's like the ads, well, you can't advertise something you don't have in hand, but,
Right.
and they just don't think about, how can I start that conversation earlier? And like you're saying, you really want people to get to know you as a person, not
Yep.
just your book and look at a book title and make that decision, but they really want to know, like, and trust you. And that process should start a lot earlier than it actually
Hmm.
does. So will you speak into that a little bit, maybe
Yeah.
Jessica, just about what your journey's been like?
Yeah.
Do you look back and be like, oh, I wish I would have started XYZ a little bit
Sure.
earlier, or, my next book, I'll do it differently as far as
Yeah.
that goes about building your audience?
Yeah. So, I mean, because I was traditionally published, they actually posted my book on Amazon 6 months before it was coming out, which
Uh-huh.
kind of freaked me out. And then they
Yeah.
were all like, pre-orders, pre-orders. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, oh my gosh, but how do I convince someone to buy a book that's not there? Right.
Yeah.
So I was
Yeah.
kind of like freaking out. But I mean, several things I did. I did a lot of fun like giveaway things like, hey,
Uh-huh.
if you pre-order my book, like you can buy this. I had custom made hoodies like designed that went with my book, like you can win one of these hoodies. Or I did a nice plaque that the quote, kind of the quote my whole book was based off of, somebody won that. So I did some of these giveaways where it's like it created a little bit of buzz, it created
Uh-huh.
a little bit of like, oh, what is this about? Or I really like this quote, what I really like that hoodie, what's this book about? And then an incentive, right, for them to say, oh, you know what, I was going to buy it anyway, but I'll just pre-order it now
Yeah.
because I want to be in this, contest or win this
Uh-huh.
thing. So that helped for sure. But I mean, you're kind of limited with that too, right? Like I don't have unlimited money to be like giving away, incentive and prizes.
Uh-huh.
So I did a few things like that. But I tell you, one of the best things I did, and I was just talking to a friend, her book launched a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I did, and I wasn't even, it's funny because I was just trying to build a launch team, right? I don't know if you guys have ever talked
Uh-huh.
on the podcast about the
Yeah.
idea of like getting a group of people to read your book ahead of time, right? So I knew that was important. So I just kind of wasn't sure how to do that. And what I
Uh-huh.
started doing was at first I posted something online like, hey, who wants to be on my launch team? And you get like 3 people and you're like,
Uh-huh.
wow, yay.
Yes.
Right. And then I realized, and I know this even in me and my husband are pastors.
Uh-huh.
There's a difference between going up front at church on Sunday and saying, hey, we need youth workers. Does anybody
Uh-huh.
want to be a part of our youth ministry? You'll get like 2, 3 people, right? I'm making an announcement. But if I go individually to someone and say, hey, I could see you doing this. You would be an amazing youth leader. And I
Uh-huh.
ask them personally, again, they may say no, but
Right.
it's just different. Right. It
Mm-hmm.
feels more intimate. It feels more, the person feels more seen. So I said, you know what, this is going to take a long time, but I'm going to just start asking people that I know love, God
Uh-huh.
and would be blessed by this book. I'm just going to individually send messages to people and say, hey, would you like to join my launch team? And when I did that, a lot of people were like, yes, definitely. I say, okay, here's the link to Amazon.
Uh-huh.
Can you just shoot me a screenshot to let me know you pre-ordered it, and then I'll send you a digital copy. Like I didn't
Uh-huh.
just send a digital copy.
Right.
Like only those people that pre-ordered were
Mm-hmm.
officially on the launch team, and only those people then got the digital copy to read. So again, it was kind of an incentive for them. Oh, I should probably pre-order it right now
Uh-huh.
so I can start reading this digital copy. I'd asked hundreds and hundreds. I had over 500 people on my launch team,
Yay.
which was
Wow.
amazing.
Yeah.
But it was a
Yeah.
lot of stinking work to ask that
Yeah.
many people, but it really showed me something. But
Uh-huh.
then I had over 500 pre-orders just from that. Like it
Uh-huh.
was a guaranteed, like I knew all these people had ordered my book.
Uh-huh.
Which creates, it's good for Amazon, creates buzz. The other, Barnes and Noble, the other people are looking, oh, how many pre-orders do they have? How many should we
Mm-hmm.
have in stock? So it's a win-win. But I think sometimes we're so afraid to ask. And I
Mm-hmm.
think like I would just encourage any first time author, do not be afraid to ask. So many people want to be a part of something.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know your book is a blessing, then even more so. It's not like you're like, hey, do this thing for me, please. It's
Yeah.
like if
Yeah.
you really believe your book is going to bless that person, then it's something you want to give them. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
burden. It's like, hey, I have this blessing for you. And some people will still say no. Who cares? That's fine. But
Right.
realize that when you ask somebody individually, it's like a super intimate thing and they just want to help you. And then you realize they're going to be blessed by the book. To me, it's a win-win. And then what
Mm-hmm.
happened was that launch team became like, my gosh, like they helped me sell so many more books because they were
Mm-hmm.
like, this book is amazing. And like, so their word of mouth was spreading. And so I
Yeah.
really think, obviously, creating awareness and all that stuff. But I think at the end of the day, you need other people. Like, you cannot toot your own horn for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But if
Yeah.
somebody else has your book ahead of time, like a digital copy, reads it and then posts something online spontaneously saying, this book was amazing and let me show you a quote, all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden, all the people they follow are like, hey, what's this all about? And
Yeah.
it's not me pushing something. It's a genuine, like, hey, I really gained something from this. And to me, that sells so much greater than just me being like, hey, I got a book, I got a book, I got a book, I got a book.
Yes.
And so I would really encourage first time authors, and you can do that whether you're traditionally published or not. You can reach out to people ahead of time and say, hey, I'd
Mm-hmm.
love you to be on our launch team. Just go ahead and order the book and send me a screenshot, and you'll see a ton of not only book sales, but then people have that book, they're starting to read it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you start word of mouth, is that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like people can't talk about it if they haven't read it, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, that's been huge for me. I was like so overwhelmed by that. And I was telling my friend who had a book come out a couple weeks ago, I'm like, make sure you ask everybody. And we're very hesitant, right? Like, oh,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
other people, do not be hesitant.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
if you believe it's a blessing, just ask. And they can
Mm-hmm.
say no. They have every right to say no, and that's okay, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love that so much, Jessica, because I was thinking, yeah, just when you add, like, you can just blast out, hey, I've got this book coming out. Who wants to be on my lunch team? And I know, like, nowadays, everybody's just like, oh my gosh, really? Like, I don't want to be on another
Mm-hmm.
launch team because it's so much work, usually, with so much
Mm-hmm.
expectations. But to be able to ask one on one and share, like what you keep saying, share the blessing of it. So it's
Yeah.
not just here's another book to put on your shelf. Like, there's a true blessing in these words. And I
Mm-hmm.
really feel like they will bless you as a reader, and I would love, be so honored to get that, feedback from you. And people just, yeah, people respond to that. I mean, I used to run book launch teams for traditional publishers, and it was so fun, but it was way back in the times when you could just put a blast out like that and
Right.
everybody would
Get
sign
tons
up,
of people.
and everybody got free books. We didn't have to pre-order back then. And everybody just wanted that interaction with the author. That's really all they
Mm-hmm.
cared about. They would share the book and stuff, some, but I don't think it was as genuine as what you're talking about now. So
Mm-hmm.
I love that so much, and it is doable. Like you said, you're not pretending it wasn't hard work, but it
No,
paid
that was all.
off.
That
It
was all. If I
definitely.
if I got 500 people to sign up, that means I asked more
Yes.
than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think about,
But
with like social and some of the things we try to do to get our book out there, and we spend so much time and energy on it, and maybe a couple of people even respond, or even see it.
Mhm.
They may not even be your target readers, but you're actually reaching out to people, they are your target readers, and they of course know other target readers. So
Right.
yeah, that's so beautiful. That's such great advice. So I want to ask you about your podcast too, Jessica, about Full Spectrum Parent that you
Mhm.
co-host with your husband. So tell us a little bit about that, and how has that helped you to also, build and grow your audience and market your book at the same time?
Yeah. So let's see. It's over 2.5 years since we started our podcast, even before I got a book deal.
Uh-huh.
Me and my husband, when our daughter was diagnosed in 2012, we didn't know a single family with a child with autism.
Uh-huh.
So it was very much of a solo journey. And I remember always looking for, I don't even know how podcasts were very popular back then, but I remember
Uh-huh.
looking for anything, books, like online resources, like recordings, teachings, documentaries. And I would find a lot of information, but
Uh-huh.
not a lot of connection with like another family or another mom going through this. So we said, we want to create a podcast for families to help them not feel alone, right?
Mm-hmm.
And especially we have a faith piece to it. So like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of autism podcasts out there, but there aren't actually we couldn't find any
Uh-huh.
that were Christian, right? Like
Yeah.
how do I deal with, like being, angry at God or just wondering where God is in all of this
Uh-huh.
and just my faith and just all
Yeah.
these questions we have, right? That are much deeper than just, oh, the neurology of the brain and what they should eat and all the
Mm-hmm.
things, that are important. But
Yeah.
yes, that's why we started it. And honestly, it's been such a blessing just for me and my husband in general, let alone the
Uh-huh.
fact that it's blessed other people. It's just been a kind of a common goal that we were working towards and doing together. But it's been amazing as far as just reaching our target audience, right? Because a lot of times somebody's looking, hey, I'm looking for a Christian podcast with, about autism.
Mm-hmm.
So they're looking for that. They're not even looking for a book, but they stumble
Yeah.
upon us and then they're like, oh, she wrote a book, right? Like, so it creates this awareness, but not only that, it's that whole like building a trust, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you've listened to 10 episodes of me and my husband sharing crazy stories of our life
Mm-hmm.
and our kids, you start to feel like, well, I know them. And I'd want to know more of what she has to say, right? And
Uh-huh.
so it really is that target audience, in kind of a roundabout way, right? So, but we've done several podcasts. Like we did one in March when my book came out, and then we did several even after that, kind of around some of the chapters and the topics. So we took the format of the podcast and kind of highlighted the book for so many episodes, which was super helpful too. And then of course, putting like the link in the description and that kind of stuff. So that has been really helpful. And that's something that continually just people are listening to. Oh, well, I do listen to your podcast. And I got to the episode where you're talking about your book. And now I want, I have people all the time reach out to me and say, hey, I've been listening to your podcast for a year. I just realized you wrote a book, right? Like,
yeah, that's so true.
Realize it's that kind of, I think one of the most important things we can do is cross-pollinate, right? That's the word they use, right? Where you're just, you're reaching people in different ways and then you're exposing them. Oh, like, so I put in my book that I have a podcast and I talk about my podcast, my book and right. Like, so they're cross-pollinating and like reaching people through different avenues. I think that's super important. And it really continues. It's one of those things that works in the background. Like I'm not doing anything right now. But people are listening to that episode or people are discovering the podcast and that's helping them find the book and vice versa. And so it just kind of works in the background.
Yeah.
So it's really been awesome. Super helpful.
Oh, I love hearing that too. And I so appreciate that, as y'all, you've thought about what would a podcast about, or you thought there's a resource missing, right? There's a void here that, like you said, there's other autism podcasts, but there's not a Christian autism podcast. And, then it's even more niche, right? That it's you and your husband together. I mean, that's super unique. I can't even imagine my husband and I trying to tackle that, but it'd be fun. I know, but yeah, it would, oh gosh, I can't even imagine, but I'm sure it's great for your marriage too, but yeah, I mean, thank God I don't have to because you've done it. So, but I love that, it's like, the landscape and where you can pop in and fill the void. And also recognizing that, some people they're looking for, they have a problem they're trying to solve and they're looking for these answers. And the answer may be your podcast. It may not be your book yet, but they're going to get to it. But like you say, you have to keep sharing, on your podcast. People don't realize, oh yeah, I've heard, maybe she said it 20 times, but I didn't get it. But now I must be needing it now. God's really telling me I need this book, or vice versa. I love that you put that in your book about your podcast because I know oftentimes I put a book down and I'm just like, oh, I need more, so you go find them on social or you go find their podcast. And get to listen to them more often. So I love that so much. That's so awesome. Well, this has been so good, Jessica. I'm just so excited again that you reached out to me and we got to record this today. And are there any parting words you'd like to share with our listeners before we end it?
I would just encourage anybody listening that if you're doubting yourself, if you're writing and you're thinking about a book and you're like, oh, I don't know, just take the leap. Like there's something about building the plane in the air. You don't have to have it all figured out, right? Just start writing or just start pitching, or same thing if you want to start a podcast, right? We talked about starting a podcast 5 years ago, but it took us like 2.5 years to get up the nerve to just do it, right? Well, we don't know what we're doing technically or whatever. Well, just start, right? And, you take baby steps. Just want to encourage, I mean, it's really what it is. Nobody really knows what they're doing and they're just pretending to know. So just start. Get over that and just go take those baby steps, whatever it is that God's calling you to do.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. This has been so amazing. And I'll be sure to put links to your book, Unlimited Motherhood, and to your podcast and your website and all the good stuff. Well, Jessica, thank you again for your time today. I so appreciate it. I know my listeners are just going to love this episode.
Thanks so much, Kim.
Y'all, I was taking notes like crazy on what Jessica was sharing, especially about using your God-given influence to connect with your target readers and build your audience ahead of a book launch. Podcasting has definitely played a part in her author journey, and I hope you'll consider it for yours too. Thanks for tuning in today, and as always, I'll be there for you to help you build your audience and reach new readers one podcast at a time. See you then.